Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're taking a look at the largest simulation to date on this channel. We have simulated the NBA from 1947 to 2100, which is a merger of the two part 2 simulations that I've done in the past. So we've simulated from 1947 till the 2101 preseason, and we've taken a look at all the accolades, all the players. And as a reminder, Basketball GM, which is the website that I'm using for this, is a completely free tool that you can find online at basketballgm.com, and it allows you to pull historical data. It uses real players or made up players if you wish. You can just choose your team and you can put it on autopilot, or you can actively manage it as if you were the general manager of a team, and you can just simulate the entirety of so many seasons, however many seasons you want. So in this case, as you see here, we are the Boston Massacre, which are the Boston Celtics. They do not have the rights to the team's names, but they do have the same players' names. And it's really cool because you can see injuries to players, or like players that have been cut short by injuries full blossom out into the superstars that they were supposed to be, and so on. So we're going to take a look at as usual, the awards, who won the most awards, and so on. We're going to take a look at some of the players that are widely considered top 10 players of all time. And then, in addition to that, we're also going to use some statistical analysis to compare trends across history, both in real life and in the simulation, and compare how the two turned out. But we'll get more into that later. So let's take a look at the first, who won the most championships from 1947 to 2100. And we get the league leader in this case is Ed Fleming. Ed Fleming in this case won 7 championships. He won all of them in the 50s, 60s, and one in 1970. He was a 7-time champion. He retired, but he did not make the Hall of Fame. So let's take a look at his career. He likely was just a solid rotation piece or contributor. He averaged 11 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.6 assists, so nothing too exciting. But he was a 7-time champion, and even a second team All League, and a third team All League member, and a 7-time All Star. So that's actually very surprising that he did not make the Hall of Fame. And yeah, completely wrong with the prediction. He was not a solid contributor. He was a very solid player overall. He was a 7-time All-Star, as I said. So that's surprising he didn't make the Hall of Fame, especially given that he's a 7-time champion. But anyway, so let's see. Aside from Ed Fleming, we have Oscar Robertson, who won 7 championships with Detroit and Washington. Let's see. Yeah, so that's, I was just making sure that all these years are counted for. So if you can see here, for example, the last championship is in the year 2100, where Portland won the championship. But let's go back at Oscar Robertson, who won 7 championships. And let's see how his career turned out. Oscar Robertson, of course, in real life is one of the greatest point guards of all time, and the original Mr. Triple-Double. He played his first 3 seasons in Detroit and then transitioned to Washington, Boston, Indiana, and Golden State. He averaged 27 points, 11.1 assists, and 6.1 rebounds, so very, very good averages. He was a 9-time MVP, a 7-time champion, a 7-time Finals MVP. He was also the Rookie of the Year and a 6-time scoring champion, a 13-time assist leader, and a 17-time All-Star and 8-time All-Star MVP, so very, very good averages for his career. We're definitely going to keep him here in turning call in case he becomes the GOAT of this simulation, of course. But as you can see, he played well into his 30s and even into his 40s. He retired when he was 41. Of course, by then his averages were relatively putrid at 1.5 points. But so it's even harder to imagine what his real averages would have been like without those seasons. In his peak season, he averaged 35.9 points, and he even averaged 13.7 assists in one of his seasons at a career high, and 7.4 rebounds. So very, very good number, and definitely a more impressive career than the already Hall of Fame career of Oscar Robertson. Then we have LeBron James, who we're going to take a look at soon. And then we have Gary Bradds, who is a relatively unknown player. Let's see. It doesn't look like later on after our simulation ran its course after the year 2020, that it looks like not many players won a lot of championships. We can see here that Andrew Mitchell won 5 championships in Washington and Dallas in 2049 and so on. Robertson Burdette won in Los Angeles. For a while, it looks like all these players played on the same team, and likely only these two guys were the main components because they did not make the Hall of Fame, but these two guys did, and so on. So yeah, it looks like some dynasties were more prevalent early on, and then the NBA was more balanced. So after we've taken a look at that, let's look at the Finals MVP. So we have Oscar Robertson, who won 7 Finals MVP, LeBron James, who won 6 Finals MVPs out of 6 championships, and as a reminder, we're going to take a look at his career later. And then we have Cameron Thomas, who won 5 Finals MVPs. So let's take a look at his career really quick. He was the 7th pick of the first draft out of Kentucky in 2067. Of course, he's a mid-up player because he hasn't been even born yet. He averaged almost 22 points, 8.8 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. 8.8 assists and 4.1 rebounds. These are the turnovers. So pretty good numbers. In his peak scoring seasons, he ended up averaging over 30 points, which is really, really good. And actually, he ended up having his scoring seasons later in his career, so very, very good. In terms of field goal percentage, nothing too crazy. Likely due to the fact that he took over 11 attempts, 3-point attempts per game, so that might have skewed his raw field goal percentage. Overall, he was a 3-time MVP, a 5-time champion, a 5-time Finals MVP, a 6-time scoring leader, and a 13-time All-Star. So definitely very solid career. Very, very good. And possibly one of the greatest players of all time. Let's just keep him up for a sake. Then let's take a look at awards for the most valuable player. This time we have a clear-cut winner, which is very surprising, Jake Robinson. Jake Robinson won 10 MVPs in Milwaukee and he dominated the 2060s. He won all his MVPs in the 2060s. So yeah, the only season he didn't win MVP was 2068 of that decade. So that's really impressive. Let's take a look at his career really quick. Of course, he hasn't been born yet, so he's a made-up player. He was the first pick of the draft. Let's see, he played very long career, well into his 40s. He retired at 43 years old. He averaged 23 points, 14.7 rebounds, and 5 assists. The rebound numbers are staggering. He ended up averaging 18 rebounds in one of his peaks seasons when he was 29, which is very, very impressive. He never developed too much of a 3-point shot, although, later on in his career when he was a 39-year-old or older than that, he ended up having some solid shooting seasons. Overall, he was a 10-time MVP. He only won 1 championship, and he did not win the Finals MVP because that was at the tail end of his career the year before he retired in 2082. He was a 9-time DPOY, which is impressive, and he was the most improved player in 2061, which is hard to believe given that he was the MVP in 2060. So very, very impressive and definitely a Hall of Fame career, as he was a 19-time All-Star as well. I just wish he would have won more championship, I guess. That's the only knock on his legacy. But he also looks like he had a herniated disc in 2065 that sidelined him for a third of the season. So it looks like his injury... and in 2081, he even tore his ACL. So that's definitely something to note. And he retired in 2082, so likely that definitely slowed him down. So let's keep him up just because he looks like he's a very, very good defensive player. And as I said, Defensive Player of the Year, Jake Robinson is right here. However, LeBron James won 10, so even more than he did. So that is definitely very, very impressive for LeBron James, and we're going to take a look at his career in a minute. Let's take a look at other players that we might know. Okay. So these players won 6 Defensive Player of the Years. Of course, they haven't retired yet, but they're going to likely make the Hall of Fame. And it looks like Nerlens Noel won Defensive Player of the Year twice, but he didn't make the Hall of Fame. And Nick Bible in Memphis in 2056-2057 did the same thing, and Pete Williams as well. They both won it twice, but didn't make the Hall of Fame. So that's very interesting. Let's see, we have Akeem Olajuwon, who won 5. And actually, let's take a look at his career, just because it's interesting to see. Let's see, Hakeem ended up averaging 19 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. So pretty good numbers. In his peak scoring season, he ended up averaging 34 points. Wow, that is very impressive. And 14 rebounds, which is almost a career high. He was a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, a 4-time MVP, a Most Improved Player, 3-time league scoring leader, and a 7-time league rebounding leader. Unfortunately, he did not win any championships, but arguably his individual accolades are better in this simulation than in real life. Of course, Hakeem is a top 3, even if you don't like him, top 5 center of all time, no questions. And it's interesting to see his career taking a different path. He was, of course, a very good defender in real life, but he didn't win 4 Defensive Player of the Years, and he didn't win 4 MVPs. But in real life, he also won 2 more championships than in the simulation. Lastly, we're going to look at all-star teams, and it looks like Jason Richardson actually had the most all-star MVPs, which is interesting, not to be confused with Jake Robinson, who we already looked at, who is right below him at 19. So let's take a look at Jason Richardson. Jason Richardson, of course, was the 3rd pick by the Chicago Bulls in 2001. He ended up playing well into his 40s. He ended up retiring at age 46, still averaging 20.7 points, which is amazing. He ended up averaging 26 points for his career, 6.9 rebounds, and 7.5 assists. In his peak scoring season, he averaged over 40 points on 50, barely missing the 50, 40, 90 mark, but still very, very impressive. I'm trying to see if he ever broke the 50, 40, 90 mark. Let's see. It doesn't look like he ever broke the 50, 40, 90 mark. Unfortunately, he was always shy of a few percentage points, but still very, very impressive. Overall, he was a 7-time MVP, a 2-time champion, and a 1-time Finals MVP, an 11-time scoring leader, and a 20-time All-Star. So we're definitely going to keep him up because he looks like he might be one of the greatest players of all time in this simulation. It looks like early on he suffered 2 torn ACLs. Wow, I'm surprised. Wow, that's really hard for a player to recover. The Chicago Bulls have really bad luck with torn ACLs. Wow, okay, a 3rd time a torn ACL who sidelined him for over a season. Okay, well, despite all these injuries, he ended up having an excellent career. I wonder what his career could have been like without these injuries. All right, so now that we've taken a look at that, let's see if we can look at more players. But before we do that, another very cool feature of Basketball GM is the ability to take a look at the teams. This is a little more tedious process, but it's still really cool. If we look at league stats and you look at team records, it's going to take a while to load, but you can look at the teams that have performed the best over this course of the season. The best win percentage, excluding historic teams, goes to the Los Angeles Earthquakes, which are the equivalents of the LA Lakers, followed closely by the Brooklyn Bagels, who have way less games, of course, but still a very good percentage than the Washington Monuments and so on. The most finals made were by the Washington Monuments with 21 finals, and the most titles as well by the Washington Monuments, followed by the Atlanta Gold Club. The team that won the most MVP is the Atlanta Gold Club, and the team that won the most DPOY is the Milwaukee Cheesemakers. So very, very good. Of course, the Los Angeles Lakers in real life are, of course, one of the better franchises. Not so much the Brooklyn Nets and the Washington Wizards, and the Clippers as well. Actually, I might have misspoken. The Earthquakes might mimic the Clippers in this case, and the Lowriders might mimic the Lakers. Either way, if the Earthquakes do mimic the Clippers, then it's definitely a shock in this simulation. Let's see, the worst performing team in history was the Charlotte Queens. Not surprising, they do have a fairly smaller sample size compared to everything else, but even in real life, the Charlotte Hornets are not the greatest franchise of all time. Now, let's take a look at some historical players who in real life are widely considered top 10 of all time and see how they performed. First, we have LeBron James, first pick of the 2003 draft, this time with the Toronto Raptors. He ended up averaging 23.4 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 8.6 assists, which is a really, really good career averages. LeBron is now averaging 27, 7, and 7 for his career, although he has never recorded the 27, 7, and 7 stat line, which is an interesting fact. In his peak scoring season, he ended up averaging over 30 points, which is more than he did in his peak scoring season in real life. He ended up averaging over 10 rebounds in a couple of seasons and over 11 assists in a couple of them and over 10 assists in 5. So very, very impressive career. Very similar numbers. Of course, as LeBron James, declines and goes up in age, we may see similar scoring numbers in terms of his decline. He ended up playing until he was 40, which is a reasonable goal with LeBron James. He averaged 11 points, which is pretty respectable for a 40-year-old. So he retired in 2024. For his career, he was a 6-time MVP, a 6-time champion, a 6-time Finals MVP, a 10-time DPOY, the Rookie of the Year, a 12-time First-Team All-NBA, a 15-time All-Star, and a 5-time All-Star MVP. Definitely really, really, really good career for LeBron James. Much more individual success and team success for sure. In real life, of course, he's only won 3 championships, but has been to 9 consecutive finals. He has not won 10 Defensive Player of the Year awards, so this is definitely a defensive improvement. I would dare saying that he's probably going to make more first team all-league than this 12, and more all-star appearances for sure. But still, it looks like after 2018, his career kind of fell off. He signed with a different team. Let me see if we can see what team he signed with in 2015. Let's see. This is a very long career arc to look at. 2015, he ended up with LeBron James records all the statistics. It doesn't look like he changed the team. He might have just changed his salary amount. And in 2015, there was no major injuries, so it's likely something to do with just his age, of course, deteriorating his play style and stuff. But this is a very solid career. We're going to keep it up. Michael Jordan, of course, by many considered the GOAT. He ended up averaging only 20.3 points and around 5 assists and rebounds. So pretty solid numbers, especially peak numbers with 34 points, but nothing close to his actual real-life counterpart. He was the first pick of the draft, not the third pick in this case. It truly looks like, let's see, 2-point percentage, free throw, 2-point percentage and free throw are fairly similar, as well as the 3-point percentage. He was never a 3-point threat, and he didn't take that many attempts. For his career, he was a 3-time champion, a 5-time MVP, just like in real life, a 2-time Finals MVP, a 2-time DPOY, a 2-time scoring leader, and overall a 10-time All-Star. So, still a Hall of Fame career, of course, and, very, very good. Nothing close to his actual career, and I would definitely argue that LeBron James in this simulation fared way better. So we're going to have to X Michael out for the moment. Let's take a look at Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson averaged, for his career, 16 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 6.2 assists. So nothing compared to his actual assist numbers in real life. His peak season, he only averaged 8.5 assists instead of over 12 as he did in real life. He played most of his career with Sacramento and played in San Antonio later on. Let's see. He was a 2-time MVP, which is really good, and he even won a championship and Finals MVP. He was the most improved player and a 9-time All-Star. So arguably not the greatest point guard in this simulation, especially considering that Oscar Robertson is in GOAT contention, but still a really, really solid Hall of Fame career. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, by many considered the greatest center of all time and borderline top 5 player of all time by most people. In his peak scoring season, he ended up averaging over 30 points, and in terms of rebounds, less than his actual real-life counterpart, but still pretty good, and he never averaged that many assists as he did in real life. He averaged 22 points, 8.4 rebounds, and less than 2 assists. And for his career, he was a one-time champion and one-time Finals MVP. He won a Defensive Player of the Year, so wow, triple crown. Double crown, I guess. He didn't win the MVP that season, but still very, very impressive season, 1976. And he was a 9-time All-Star, so pretty good career, nothing close to his almost GOAT-worthy career in real life, but still pretty good. Let's see. Let's take a look at the greatest Laker of all time, arguably Kobe Bryant. In this simulation, Kobe averaged 21.8 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. In his peak scoring season, he averaged 27.3 points on, wow, 94% from the free throw line, which is very, very good. Definitely really, really good. And he also upped his three-point percentage compared to his real-life counterpart. He was a 5-time All-NBA first-team member, 6-time All-NBA second-team member, and a 14-time All-Star. So again, nothing close to his actual real-life career, which puts him as the second greatest shooting guard of all time, in my opinion. And nowhere, you could argue that he's maybe the first, if you prefer him over Michael Jordan, but no lower than second. But still very Hall of Fame worthy career in this case. And he retired just like in real life in 2016. And let's take a look at Larry Bird. Larry Bird is arguably the second greatest small forward of all time, unless you like KD more. He only ended up playing around 10 seasons in the league. He averaged 18 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. So nothing close to his real life counterpart. His 3-point percentage is really good. He ended up averaging over 40%. Of course, he didn't take that many attempts, so that likely contributed to it. But his free throw was much lower than in real life. He ended up in real life doing breaking the 50-40-90 club, but not in this case. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame. He was a 5-time All-Star and a Rookie of the Year, but nothing that jumps out, especially considered his career. Likely a herniated disc in his rookie season caused him to miss 30 games, but also probably caused him to be a little bit slower overall, which likely impacted his career. Next, we're going to take a look at Luka Doncic, who by many simulations has turned out to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest players of all time. So let's see how he fared in this simulation. For his career, he averaged 22 points, 9.4 rebounds, and 8.9 assists, so very, very, very well-rounded numbers. Not as much as the other simulations, maybe, but still really good. In his, he ended up averaging a triple-double many years, or around that or so. He ended up, for example, in 2025, he averaged 28.5 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 10.5 assists, which is really good. He was an MVP, a 2-time champion, and a 2-time Finals MVP, the Rookie of the Year, and a league scoring leader, assist leader, and steals leader in 3 different years, and a 13-time All-Star. So again, I would hope for Luka to have such career, of course. Maybe he could win even more MVPs in real life, but that would be really amazing if he could have such a career. It looks like in 2027 he had a fractured foot which sidelined him for half of the season, but no major injuries overall. Lastly, we're going to look at Emoni Bates, who by many is considered one of the better prospects since LeBron James. And by one simulation that I ran a while ago, now he was by far the GOAT of that simulation. So we're going to take a look at his career. Well, not in this case. He was not a GOAT-worthy material. He averaged 15.5 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 2 assists, so nothing close to the potential that he showed in other simulations. He was not even a Hall of Famer. He was a 5-time All-Star and a first-team All-NBA member once, but nothing close to his actual real-life counterpart. So if we just take a look at the player stats of everything since the beginning of the simulation, we can look at Steph Curry actually has one of the better free throw percentages of all time. And 3-point percentages, of course, it's hard to say because there are so many players who have not taken that many 3-point attempts, which can skew, of course, the results. So it's pretty worthless to look at that. However, in terms of points, career averages, Oscar Robertson has the highest points per game career averages with 27. And we see other names like Jason Richardson, who we looked at earlier, Rick Barry, and Devin Booker actually ended up averaging over 25 points. So there is no Michael Jordan in this simulation or Wilt Chamberlain, who both averaged 30.1 points for their career, but a lot of good, very good players. Even John Wall here. So this wraps up, almost wraps up the part 1 of this video. The only thing left is to nominate the GOAT. So let's take a look at who we took into consideration. We have, Cameron Thomas, who was a 3-time MVP, a 5-time champion, and a 5-time Finals MVP. Jake Robinson, who was a 10-time MVP, a 9-time DPOY, and a 1-time champion. LeBron James, who was a 6-time MVP, a 6-time champion, a 6-time Finals MVP, and a 10-time DPOY. And Oscar Robertson, who was a 9-time MVP, 7-time champion, 7-time Finals MVP, and 6-time scoring leader. So I would argue that Jake Robinson and Cameron Thomas especially belongs to a lower tier. Jake Robinson only won 1 championship, although he did have the most MVPs. I cannot put the fact that he only won 1 championship past him, so I would, of course, he's totally Hall of Famer and 19-time All-Star. That's one of the greatest players of all time, but I can't consider him in the GOAT conversation, which leaves us with LeBron James and Oscar Robertson. In my opinion, LeBron James has won 1 less MVP, 1 less championship, and 1 less Finals MVP, but he did win 10 more Defensive Player of the Years, and arguably in a more competitive era. He also made less All-Star appearances, but a very good number of Finals All-Star MVPs, and a lot of first-team All-Defense, which Oscar Robertson made a lot of first-team All-Defensive, but never broke the DPOY barrier. So I wouldn't be mad if you picked Oscar Robertson, but my pick for the GOAT in this simulation is LeBron James. 6-time MVP, 6-time champion, 6-time Finals MVP, all of which are straight from 2006 to 2011, and 10-time DPOY, which to me seals the deal. In the next section of the video, we'll take a look at the stats overall. But so far, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you've enjoyed. Have a good day. Bye-bye.